Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and discovering that every supermarket in your city had shut down overnight. No delivery trucks, no emergency restocking, no convenient aisles of canned soups, produce, and frozen dinners. Most of us would panic immediately. But for medieval people, this wasn't a crisis. It was reality. Their survival depended on crops so tough, so reliable, so stubbornly persistent, that they fed entire families even in brutal winters, failed harvests, and years of political chaos. Today, we're rediscovering 15 of those forgotten survival crops. These plants weren't fashionable, pretty, or engineered for perfect supermarket aesthetics. They didn't need irrigation systems, chemical fertilizers, or pesticides. They fed peasants, monks, soldiers, and even kings. And unbelievably, many of them still grow wild in fields, ditches, abandoned lots, and coastal cliffs right under our noses. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which of these crops you can grow yourself, even with little space or gardening experience. We begin with Skirret, once the pride of medieval root gardens. Skirret's white, finger-like roots were described as sweeter than carrots and smoother than parsnips. Medieval royalty adored it, and cooks used it in everything from roasted meat dishes to sweet pastries. But peasants valued it for a different reason. It practically grew itself. Plant it once, and Skirret multiplied underground year after year, like a quiet savings account of calories waiting to be dug up when times got hard. Skirret thrived when other crops failed. During bitter winters, when frost killed vegetables stored in poor cellars and rodents raided grain supplies, families could still dig Skirret roots out of frozen soil. It was a dependable winter food, a rarity in medieval Europe. But as agriculture industrialized, Skirret's irregular shapes and slow growth worked against it. Supermarkets want uniform roots, not clusters of skinny ones. So Skirret was forgotten, but never disappeared. It remains one of the easiest perennial crops to cultivate today. Another early superstar was Alexander's, a plant brought to Britain by the Romans that quickly became a medieval favorite. What made Alexander's extraordinary was its versatility. The leaves tasted like peppery parsley. The stems were cooked like celery. The roots resembled a mild carrot. The seeds replaced expensive black pepper, and even the flowers were tossed into salads. Alexander's grew everywhere: cliffs, roadsides, pastures, abandoned walls. For medieval people, it was the gift that kept on giving. Alexander's was especially important in spring, when stored winter food was running low, and fresh crops were still weeks away. Its early leaves helped bridge that hunger gap. It vanished from modern agriculture mainly because celery became trendy in the 1700s. But Alexander's remains widespread in the wild, thriving without care. Medieval farmers would laugh at the fact that we now walk past it, unaware that we're ignoring a vegetable once found in every garden. Our next forgotten treasure is Good King Henry, a name shrouded in mystery. No one knows which king inspired it, but everyone knew its worth. It was one of the most reliable perennial greens of the medieval age. You could cook the young shoots like asparagus, the mature leaves like spinach, and the flower buds like miniature broccoli. It tolerated poor soil, shade, cold, and neglect. Medieval families considered it a forever plant, one that returned each spring when food was most scarce. Good King Henry's nutrition would impress modern dietitians, high in iron, vitamin C, and plant-based protein. During early spring, when old supplies ran out and new crops weren't ready, these greens were life-saving. Yet it fell out of fashion because industrial farming prefers annual vegetables that fit neatly into crop rotations. A plant that grows back on its own every year didn't match the new agricultural business model, but it still grows easily in home gardens today. Now, we arrive at one of the strangest vegetables medieval people cultivated: Salsify, often called the oyster plant. When cooked, its creamy white flesh tastes remarkably like oysters, an incredible discovery for medieval Christians who observed strict fasting rules. On days when meat and fish were forbidden, Salsify became the legal, convincing substitute. Monastic gardens grew it deliberately for this reason. Salsify survived frigid winters better than most crops. You could leave it underground and harvest whenever needed. It also stored beautifully after harvest, lasting for months without refrigeration. Which begs the question, why did it vanish? Supermarkets prefer vegetables with uniform size, bright colors, and smooth shapes. Salsify's brown, thin, sometimes crooked roots lacked visual appeal, and so it was pushed aside, even though its flavor remains exceptional. If Salsify is strange, the Medlar is downright bizarre. Fresh from the tree, it is rock-hard, sour, and basically impossible to eat. But medieval people knew its secret. After several weeks of controlled softening, a process called bletting, the fruit collapses into a sweet, aromatic paste that tastes like spiced applesauce with a hint of wine. Because medlars ripen late in autumn, they became a cherished winter delicacy. While snow covered the fields, people were enjoying medlar tarts, medlar jams, and medlar wine. Its appearance and delayed edibility made it unfashionable in modern markets, but in medieval times it was the dessert that winter depended on. Next, we turn to the most humble plant of all, chickweed. Medieval farmers didn't plant it, couldn't control it, and honestly didn't bother trying. Chickweed grew everywhere. Pathways, thatched roofs, garden edges, animal pens, thriving in cold weather when other greens died. Rather than fight it, people embraced it. Chickweed is extremely rich in vitamin C, iron, and minerals, making it invaluable in winter when scurvy and nutritional deficiencies were common. Peasants tossed it into broths and salads, while healers used it for soothing inflamed skin and treating fevers. Today, we call it a weed and spray it with herbicides, never realizing we're killing one of the most nutritious free foods nature offers. Another medieval favorite was Scorzonera, a root vegetable with a name that sounds like a medieval curse, but hides a sweet, delicate flavor. Often mistaken for black salsify, Scorzonera produces long, dark roots with pure white flesh inside. Monks prized it for both food and medicine. Its greatest strength was storage. When packed in sand and kept cool, Scorzonera stayed fresh until the following summer. Nearly a year of shelf life without refrigeration. In an era when famine was a constant threat, Scorzonera's reliability made it vital. Today, it is nearly forgotten, simply because it doesn't fit modern grocery aesthetics. Then we reach the Welsh onion, a plant with a misleading name. It's neither Welsh nor a true onion, but medieval gardeners absolutely loved it. It's perennial, meaning one planting can last decades. Its clusters divide endlessly, allowing families to harvest fresh onion tops nearly year-round. During winter, when gardens looked dead, Welsh onions remained green and edible, providing flavor and vital nutrition. Their disappearance from modern agriculture came from one simple fact. Supermarkets prioritize large onion bulbs, and Welsh onions are grown mainly for greens. But for medieval survival, they were priceless. Now let's talk about fat hen, a plant that medieval people valued but modern agriculture despises. It appears spontaneously in fields and gardens, often growing faster than planted crops, which is why farmers today label it a weed. But medieval families knew better. Fat hen leaves contain more protein than cabbage, more iron than spinach, and more calcium than kale. People boiled it like spinach, added it to soups, and in desperate times, collected its seeds to grind into flour. Chickens that ate fat hen produced more eggs, explaining the name. Modern society exterminates it, unaware that we are destroying a free, nutrient-packed superfood. Another medieval powerhouse was lovage, an herb with a punch so strong that one leaf could flavor an entire pot. Its taste resembles intense, concentrated celery with a hint of parsley. Roman soldiers carried lovage seeds across Europe. Monks grew it as medicine, and medieval kitchens used every part: leaves, stems, roots, and seeds. Lovage improves digestion, reduces bloating, and acts as a mild diuretic. It's extremely hardy, surviving brutal winters and growing taller than a person each summer. Lovage faded from use only because Europe became obsessed with exotic spices like pepper and cinnamon. But if you want a low-maintenance, high-flavor perennial, lovage is unbeatable. Next is corn salad, perhaps the most misunderstood plant in this entire list. Despite the name, it has nothing to do with corn. The term comes from old European grain fields, historically called cornfields. After farmers harvested grain, corn salad sprouted naturally as a winter green. Mild, tender, and slightly nutty, it became a staple for medieval families during the cold months. It grows through frost and snow, offering fresh salad greens when everything else is dead. Nutritionally, it's rich in vitamin C, iron, and omega-3 fatty acids. But because it's delicate and must be harvested by hand, industrial agriculture ignores it. Then we come to Tansy, the herb medieval cooks adored, but modern palates avoid. Tansy has a bold, aromatic flavor, bitter, spicy, sweet, and almost medicinal all at once. Medieval cookbooks feature tansy in puddings, custards, roast meats, and even alcoholic drinks. It also acted as a natural preservative, extending the life of baked goods. Monks grew tansy near doorways because its scent repelled insects. Medicinally, it was used to treat fevers, intestinal worms, and digestive issues. Today, tansy is nearly forgotten because our flavor preferences have grown milder, not because tansy became any less useful. No plant better illustrates medieval practicality than sea kale. It grows wild on European beaches, thriving in salty, sandy soil where almost nothing else can survive. In early spring, people covered its shoots with sand or seaweed to produce pale, tender, asparagus-like stems. Later, they harvested its full-grown leaves to cook like cabbage. Sea kale is extraordinarily high in vitamin C, 6 times more than lemons, making it essential for preventing scurvy in fishing villages. Though cultivated in the 18th century, it slowly disappeared from kitchens, overshadowed by easier-to-market vegetables. Yet it still grows freely along coasts today. Our final crop is Woad, best known for producing the blue dye used in medieval textiles and even body paint. But before the leaves matured enough to produce pigment, young Woad greens were edible. They had a mild mustard-like flavor and were used in early spring salads and soups. Growing Woad for dye required fermenting leaves, producing a terrible smell that led to bans on Woad processing near towns. Still, the plant served a dual purpose, feeding people in spring and coloring fabrics throughout the year. The last of the edible medieval crops is turnip greens, a food modern people often throw away. Medieval farmers valued the leafy tops as much as the root, sometimes even more. The greens contain 4 times more calcium, 3 times more vitamin A, and double the protein of the root. Families harvested the outer leaves again and again throughout the season, allowing the root to grow underground for winter storage. Turnip greens were added to stews, porridges, and broths, giving families nutrition during the darkest, coldest months of the year. Today, they're often ignored, but they were once essential for survival. When you look at these 15 crops together, a pattern emerges. Medieval farmers didn't care about uniform shapes, rapid growth cycles, or supermarket shine. They needed food that wouldn't fail them, food that could survive droughts, frosts, pests, and neglect. They valued plants that grew back on their own, produced high nutrition per square foot, and stayed edible long after harvesting. These crops weren't luxuries. They were insurance policies, the difference between a harsh winter and a deadly one. And incredibly, most of them still exist right outside our modern awareness. The transition from medieval practicality to industrial agriculture cost us more than we realize. We gained consistent appearance, predictable yields, and long-distance transportation, but we lost diversity, flavor, and resilience. Instead of dozens of greens, we rely on lettuce and spinach. Instead of multiple winter roots, we cultivate only potatoes and carrots. We traded low-maintenance perennials for annual crops that require heavy inputs. If supply chains broke tomorrow, most modern crops would fail without irrigation, fertilizers, and ideal conditions. But medieval crops? They survived on neglect. Yet there's hope in the fact that these plants never truly vanished. Skirret still grows in small heritage farms. Alexander's covers coastal cliffs. Good King Henry waits patiently in old cottage gardens. Chickweed thrives in every neglected patch of soil. Sea kale hugs the shorelines, and medlars hang from trees that no modern supermarket would ever accept. These crops endured centuries of agricultural change and remain as hardy as they ever were. Reviving these forgotten foods isn't just about nostalgia. It's about building a more resilient food culture. Climate change, soil depletion, and supply chain fragility make medieval crops shockingly relevant again. Their ability to thrive with minimal care, in poor soil, and under harsh weather conditions makes them ideal for home gardens, community farms, urban agriculture, and off-grid living. Growing them reconnects us to a time when people truly understood the land. Imagine a garden filled with perennial onions returning every spring, lovage towering overhead ready to flavor every pot, corn salad thriving through winter, sea kale offering vitamin-rich shoots before anything else wakes up. Imagine having roots like Skirret and Scorzonera underground, ready to feed you in cold months, greens like chickweed and fat hen providing endless salad, medlars ripening into sweet winter treats. This was normal life for medieval people, and it could be ours again. Modern gardeners often feel frustrated by short growing seasons, pests, and unpredictable weather. But medieval crops were built for exactly those challenges. They succeed where modern vegetables struggle. They don't demand perfect soil, constant watering, or fertilizers. In fact, most of them thrive in neglect. For beginners or busy people, they are some of the easiest foods to grow. And for experienced gardeners, they offer flavors and textures you can't find in grocery stores. There's also a cultural treasure hidden inside these plants. Each one connects us to generations of people who had to think differently about food. They didn't waste leaves or roots. They preserved seeds carefully. They gathered what nature offered instead of fighting it. They blended medicine and cuisine seamlessly. By growing these crops, we're not just producing food, we're preserving heritage, reviving stories, and restoring agricultural skills on the brink of being lost. And there's joy in rediscovering something forgotten. Imagine tasting medlar jelly the way medieval nobles did at winter feasts, or biting into young sea kale shoots that once nourished sailors, or roasting skirret roots that kings once praised. These foods deepen our understanding of history in the most intimate way possible, through flavor. They let us experience the past not as a story, but as a meal. So here's the real question. Which of these crops speaks to you the most? Which one feels like it belongs in your garden, on your balcony, or in your homestead? Everyone has one plant that catches their attention, sometimes because of history, sometimes because of flavor, sometimes because it's just too strange to ignore. Whether it's the oyster-like Salsify, the bold Tansy, or the reliable good King Henry, your first medieval crop is waiting. Choosing even one of these crops to grow creates a small act of resistance against the fragility of modern food systems. It introduces a plant that has already proven its worth through centuries of hardship. These crops don't care about perfect soil, expensive tools, or fancy fertilizers. They just grow, the same way they grew for the farmers, monks, foragers, and families who depended on them long before electricity or machinery existed. And the best part is how forgiving they are. If you're new to gardening, medieval crops are ideal because they don't punish mistakes. Forget to water? They'll survive. Poor soil? They'll adapt. Miss a harvest window? Most will simply wait underground or regrow next season. They don't demand constant attention. They reward patience. They were designed by centuries of trial and error in a world where failure meant hunger. They were built to succeed. Growing them also reconnects us to a rhythm of life we've lost. Modern diets rely on a narrow set of crops shipped across continents. But medieval people ate seasonally: winter roots, spring shoots, summer herbs, autumn fruits. Each crop brought its own moment of excitement during the year. Today, we can recreate that seasonal joy by planting crops like corn salad for winter freshness, medlar for December desserts, and sea kale for early spring abundance. There's also something deeply satisfying about reviving a crop that almost disappeared. It's like rescuing a piece of living history. When you harvest Skirret or good King Henry, you're harvesting the same foods eaten in castles and cottages 500 years ago. You're touching the food culture of ancestors who knew how to survive without modern conveniences. In an age of global supply chains, there's power in that kind of connection. These plants also benefit wildlife. Chickweed feeds birds in winter. Sea kale stabilizes coastal dunes. Lovage attracts beneficial insects. Fat hen supports pollinators. Medieval agriculture worked with nature far more than modern monocultures do. By reintroducing these crops into home gardens and community spaces, we help restore biodiversity and revive ecological relationships disrupted by industrial farming. Even if you live in a city or small apartment, you can still grow several of these crops in pots. Welsh onions thrive in containers. Corn salad grows happily in window boxes. Chickweed practically begs to sprout in any available space. Lovage needs a bigger pot, but once established, it becomes an impressive architectural herb. These crops don't require fields, just curiosity and a little soil. Imagine months from now, standing in your garden and harvesting a plant that hasn't been common for centuries. The story writes itself. You pull up a cluster of skirret roots and understand why royalty once demanded them. Or you pick medlars in late autumn, set them aside to blet, and discover the medieval version of winter candy. Or you cook with Alexanders, tasting the flavors Romans spread across Europe. With each harvest, you reclaim a forgotten chapter of human resilience. And the deeper message behind all of this is simple. The past still has lessons worth hearing. Medieval farmers weren't backward or primitive. They were experts in survival. They cultivated crops that could withstand drought, cold, pests, neglect, and unpredictability. They valued diversity, hardiness, and self-reliance. In a world where climate change and supply chain weaknesses grow increasingly obvious, those principles matter again, perhaps more now than ever. So, which medieval survival crop will be your first? Will you grow Good King Henry, the dependable perennial green, sea kale, the coastal champion, Lovage, the herbal powerhouse, the oyster-flavored Salsify, or maybe corn salad, the winter survivor? Whatever you choose, you'll be joining a long line of people who understood that strong food systems start with strong plants, the kind that don't break when the world does. If you enjoyed exploring these forgotten foods and want to continue reviving the lost agricultural wisdom of our ancestors, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments which crop you're excited to try. Your garden, your balcony, or even a small pot on your windowsill can become a living museum of medieval resilience. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video, where we resurrect even more knowledge worth remembering.